Okay, how did I end up here? Because you don't want to be second. Nobody wants to be second. Everybody wants to be first.
Everybody wants to be really good at everything.
Really good at everything, yeah. No one wants to lose. So,
but you're right. I mean, we only question ourselves when we're not necessarily the best at something or good at something.
Or you can be really, really good and everything's going great. And you're like, oh, this is my passion. This is what I meant to do. And then something comes your way, slaps you in the face, and then you start questioning yourself.
Welcome to Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, Araujo, and today we have a really good subject matter, which is words matter. And I wanted to bring in, and actually it was a good thing Carla was available today to co-host this with me, because it's going to be a conversation that I think not only applies to like athletes and everything we do in life, but especially in business. In business, when we hit those big obstacles, when we hit those big challenges, how do we show up? And before we even show up is what thoughts and what words resonate or are in our minds. And Carla, this is a conversation we've had for years, right? As you were a competitor, let's go ahead and put the camera on both of us, please. As you were competing, this is something that reoccurs whenever we're challenged, right? Whenever we push ourselves past the limitation, the first thing that we think about is not necessarily positive, right?
Well, no, it's just why did I even end up in this place, and what am I doing this for? It's just kind of negative talk.
Yeah, what am I doing this for?
They're kind of questions that we're asking ourselves that we obviously don't have the answers to, because we're obviously in this place. And if you're in this place, you should have the answer of, I'm going to, kick butt, and this is why I'm here. But first thing is why we ask is like, man, we're good up until the spotlight's on us. And then we're like, how did we end up here? What are we doing here? And we start to ask ourselves all these questions that we're not ready to answer.
Yeah, and we're not ready to answer because our capacity is not at that point, right? So it's easier to hold ourselves back, to think about all this negativity of why am I doing it? I'm never going to be good enough. And it's real easy to just bring ourselves down than it is to rise up, than to fight, right? It's easier to shelter ourselves than to fight, because fighting will take effort. Fighting, you may get bruised. You may get beaten up by fighting. But when you concede, there is no more resistance. You've conceded.
Right.
And this is something that I just faced this past weekend. I did my sprint triathlon, our very first A's and Associates sprint triathlon. And, there was a time where, even though I've been conditioning myself for this, the first thing that I thought about is like, what the hell am I doing? And that especially happened in the swim, because somebody had a big advantage over me, and that's our very own Rio Vidrio.
Well, I think that we have those questions and, fear, because when we're doing great, you're obviously not going to ask yourself. If you're ahead of the game, you weren't going to ask yourself questions like, what am I doing this for? But the moment we feel like we're losing or falling behind is when we start asking ourselves, how did I end up here? It's because
That's a very good
someone's
point.
Ahead of the game and someone's beating you in some sense. So you're just like, okay, how did I end up here? Because you don't want to be second. Nobody wants to be second. Everybody wants to be first.
Everybody wants to be really good at everything.
Really good at everything, yeah. No one wants to lose. So,
but you're right. I mean, we only question ourselves when we're not necessarily the best at something or good at something.
Or you can be really, really good and everything's going great, and you're like, oh, this is my passion. This is what I meant to do. And then something comes your way, slaps you in the face, and then you start questioning yourself.
It's always that slap in the face.
Right. It's always, the slap in the face. The slap in the face is what I took on as a challenge and enjoyed the pain. Because when I feel the slap in my face, it's like, oh, okay. I just kind of started, to get comfortable. And
you bring up a good point. I think there's different phases here, and this is the way I've identified them. And this is just through my own observation. Is it a psychological, pathway, or was it approved by a PhD? No. This is what I've really found out about myself as I've done competitions, as we've built businesses, Carla, as we've faced great challenges in our lives. It is that first and foremost is that negative self-talk. The second thing is that comparison. The comparison game, right? Where it's first is like, I can't do this, to now look at who else is doing it better than us, than me.
I think the comparison game comes in when you hear something negative in your mind, or you're surrounded by negativity. Mm-hmm. I know with me, I never when I started the game and then IFBB, trying to get to that place.
IFBB Pro, yeah.
I was competing, so I always compared myself. But no one really told me I wasn't good enough just yet. I was just comparing myself and taking the risk.
You were telling yourself that?
I was telling myself that. So I didn't have anybody telling me that until I got really, really good. And then I started having more surrounded by people that were like, why are you doing this? Did you know a friend of mine's already a pro? Did you know this? So it's like now not only am I hearing it from myself, but I'm hearing it in my environment.
Now it's confirmed by somebody else.
Right. And
that's what really hurts, right? Because we think all these thoughts, but at the moment it's confirmed by somebody else, we now see it as factual.
Right.
And I remember there was this particular person in our life at that time that would ask you those questions. And I wasn't bright enough or I wasn't enlightened enough to realize that was just a negative person in our lives and we needed to cut ourselves from that person, right? But I remember when you were doing these competitions, you would come in second, you would come in third, but you were the grand prize to become an IFBB Pro was always just outside of your reach. And then he would say things like, why do you keep going? Are you going to do another show? Like, you've already lost 4 shows. Or are you going to do another one? And these are the very same thoughts that you're thinking to yourself. Now you hear somebody else that's not positive in your life confirming that. It makes it more difficult to be able to rise above that. And I remember just before that, I remember one last thing that he told you. There was another individual that just did like 2 competitions and got her pro card.
Right.
And this was a mutual friend, right? And the first thing that he said when we got back from, I think it was South Carolina or something, he says to you, oh, hey, this other person was only 2 shows. And how many shows have you done?
Right.
Like, we didn't realize the negativity. And some of you have those individuals in your lives right now. But, this negative self-talk, when it's confirmed by somebody else, it makes it more difficult to get out of it, right?
It makes it does. And not many are in the situation that I was in that time. And not only did I lose to this individual, I won in so many ways, although I didn't get the crown that day. And yeah, it is true. Her second show, she became pro, and I still had 6 more under my belt before I even became pro.
Yeah.
I didn't know that yet, though. So getting off that show, I came into the office and I was just like, man, I'm bummed out. Like, I literally placed the worst ever. And here comes one of my teammates. At the time, she wasn't my teammate yet, but I knew her personally. And so we had somebody in-house that was like, how is that possible? You've done already like 5 or 6 and you're coming 3rd, 4th, and this person does 2 and she got 1st. Like, so I'm like, you're asking me a question I don't even know.
Right.
But it hit me, yes, by someone I knew. But it hit me harder when I was just confirmed by 8 judges, 6 to 8 judges, and maybe over 1,000, 2,000 people in the auditorium telling me you're not good enough. And no words weren't used to say you weren't good enough. They were just calling out numbers. And unfortunately, I didn't get called out. You get 1st, 2nd, and 3rd call outs. I literally got 3rd call outs, which is like the last. And you obviously know you're not going to place. So coming into the office, it's like he was waiting for me. That's what's crazy. Yeah. But he wasn't waiting. It's not maliciously done.
I don't think it was malicious.
No, of course
it was just
not.
Here's the thing.
It's just the
the engineering in his world, right?
Right.
The engineering in your world, and that's the engineer in my world that, we fall into this place of not have a lack, right? Where we don't have enough money. And most of us, I think, can identify with that, where our parents they supplied us with what they can, but there was always a lack of something. There was always a lack of maybe a harmonious marriage that we were witnessing from our parents, right? So there's a lot of lack, and we're wired that way.
Right.
So I don't think he was maliciously telling you. It was just the way he was wired, the way he was conditioned for many years of how you respond to certain individuals.
Right. And I didn't respond to him in negativity. I said, I'm just going to keep going. But I got to tell you, his words hurt. It did. Yeah. But I did go home that night. And of course, I was just prepping my food. And I remember coming in here with meals packed and everything like that. And he goes, wait a minute, you're going at it again? And I'm looking at him like, I am. And I had to take myself back every single time I ran into these challenges of how I grew up. And people constantly telling me I wasn't good enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't strong enough. Just constant being just cruel to me.
I remember. Let me interrupt you.
He was nothing new. His words were nothing new to me.
And that's building thick skin, guys.
Right.
And that's building mental capacity. So when you're going through these challenges, when you're able to overcome that's building thick skin. When in your business, as things are falling through, it's like, how do you show up the next day? And it's one of those things that has to do with you're able to move faster when you build that thick skin, when you build a mental capacity. Because at the moment you face a challenge, especially in like for us, the triathlon, the comparison game will now overwhelm you to a point where you don't end up where you want to be because all you're thinking about is the next person catching up to you. Now, one of the things that you said many, many years ago that has resonated, that sticks in my mind was, there's a whole old saying out there, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And I remember we were talking about that, and you said, I wish my bones were broken. I wish I was physically beaten.
You're going to make me cry right now.
Because the emotional, the words last a lifetime, especially when they're from those that love you most, and that's why they're toxic relationships. And we're tossing so many ideas and so many different examples right here because I want you to think about it as a whole. About how when your negativity is confirmed by somebody else, it becomes toxic. Or when you're constantly around the negative self-talk or the negativity of others, it will stop you on your tracks. And I remember you saying that. It's like the words that people in my life as I was growing up still last with me today. And those are the battles that I have to fight on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and it's when people say, oh, get over it and grow up, and it's... You do, but, after a while, for years and years and years and years and years that go by, eventually the reality is going to hit you as you're wired to believe you're not that good. You're wired to believe that you're not going to make it this far. So I had to overcome that, but I remember having this conversation with you on one of my breakdowns after a show. It was like, you had asked me at that time, like, what stops you from shining on stage? You're so good and your personality's not shining. I've been asked that several times, even by my coaches. You're on stage and you just freeze. And I'm like, but they didn't know the reality of my background. And you did, though. And it came to, like, I had rather growing up, and I've gotten beat up many, many times by kids pulling my hair and giving me black eyes. But I wish that would have been for years instead of, like, getting bullied by kids physically. I wish the words would have just gone away. I wish somebody would have just constantly every day punched me in the face and telling me I wasn't good enough every single day. Yeah. Because the physical wasn't as bad as the words that were wired in my brain. And I didn't realize how bad they were until the spotlight was on me and hundreds, thousands, if any, weren't cheering for me. And I'm just like, why? But it was all in me to, I just wasn't good enough. And I couldn't shine on being the person I truly am because I was mentally just really messed up. Yeah. And so, every day I wish
it didn't come from the physical, the abuse. It was more of the psychological, mental, and the words used during that time.
During one of my prep, and I use this as an example, I remember my toe, as funny as that sounds, it got really damaged, broken. And I remember just getting off that, and I remember strapping it and getting back on my Stairmaster because I had literally 2 weeks out from a show. Yeah. And I remember in the kitchen crying like at 4 a.m, just holding my toe that was just dangling, and my within seconds my toenail was turning purple. And I just remember being like, this is nothing compared to what I'm telling myself right now. I'm not good enough. What? My toe's broken. I'm done. It's like, no, strap it and get back on. And I did. And no one knew that it was actually broken. Yeah. I just went with it. I worked on 4 toes. And so I played it off, and I played it off well because the pain to me wasn't as huge as the words and not showing up to that show that was going to do more damage than good.
And there's this author that I love reading his book. His name is John Assaraf, and he has this phrase that he says that, words matter. Words create the physical matter in our lives. So if you think about it, let's break that down. Words matter. Words create the physical matter, right? What that means is like whatever you end up telling yourself is what you're going to create in reality. So if it's a life of despair and dysfunction, you're going to create that if it's constantly there, if it's on the forefront. Like I said, none of us are going to escape it. The number one thing that goes through our minds when we get hit by an obstacle is negativity. We all know that. Okay? Then we start the comparison game. Before we finally say, no, I can do that. That's the third phase of this. The positive self-talk is much more difficult for us as humans to be able to get to. It's not like a big obstacle happens and it's like, okay, now I'm going to go fight some more. right? Or now I'm going to go run more, or I'm going to go, go get more business as soon as this deal fell through. It's like, no, the first thing is like, damn it. Is this ever going to turn my way? Am I ever going to get ahead? Things never happen to me. So that is the first thought, regardless of how good you are. Now, the difference between those that have and that are succeeding at a high level versus those that are constantly in dysfunction and despair is how long it takes you to go from the negativity to the comparison to you going out there and dominating your space. That's the difference, how quick you can get through the phases to level 3. Positive self-talk, positive reinforcement. I'm going to get this. Nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to keep going. I was born for this. Those are the phases. But the thoughts really do matter, right? And it's not necessarily what others are saying. When they confirm what you're thinking, yeah, that hurts. But it's usually what you're saying to yourself, right? And during this process, Carla, like this sprint triathlon that we self-imposed, it was our first annual AZ and Associates sprint triathlon. The swimming game got a little bit, ahead of me, where I went through that negativity where I had like 20 laps down and I still had, 10 more laps to go. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to finish this. I'm slowing down. I can't breathe properly. Sure enough, I see Rio, who's a pretty good swimmer, get out of the pool. I'm like, fuck, there he goes. He's going to beat me. Look where he's at. Until I realized, wait a minute. How about I just focus on myself? I only have 100 meters left to go. That's 4 laps. Did you realize, like, after I stopped that negative self-talk, after I stopped the comparison, that was my fastest time during my entire swim. When I said, I know what to do. I got this shit. I'm going. I'm moving. I hopped out of there quickly. And I ended up, like, really just taking that whole process with me of, like, I was built for this. I've been through worse type of thing. And the reminders, right? That's something that you always talk about. Reminding ourselves of how things used to be.
Right.
Because anything we're facing right now is not nothing new. It might be a new version of it.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, even when I remember just when I said enough is enough kind of deal, and I came out of the restroom and I'm like, that's it. I'm going to take this to wherever it takes me, because I had realized I've been here before and I love the lights. I love the stage. I love feeling powerful, and I love feeling all these things. I don't like feeling like I'm completely lost and not empowered. I don't like that feeling. I don't like the feeling of feeling like the audience and the judges are bullying me and teasing me. They're not. They're not. No one is. It's all in my own head. So I finally said, hold on a second. I have been an athlete since I was a child. I am built for this.
It's almost like a slap in the face to yourself, right?
Well, in the prepping and the running around in the gym and all that, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm built for this. This is me. And as hard as this people, it is hard. Don't take me wrong. It is mentally hard, but it's easy because I'm built for this. This is who I am, and I have to take myself back to who I was, to what I'm now.
And all of us have that power within us, right?
Right.
If we just think about certain situations in our life, if we think about certain things that we've overcome in our lives, we've all been in that place. But it's about bringing that example when you're in the midst of the pain, right? That's the tough part.
And it's everything that we built. I mean, from me going to realizing when I became a pro, okay, what I want to do with it. Okay, let me take it to the next level. Let me take it to this. Let me take it to that. Okay, I want to create a podcast. I want to create a women's group. I want to create. So it's constantly like all these new doors started opening up of like opportunities that I had to grab onto because it felt so good. And I knew there were so many things that I can bring to the table by just my story. So I had to, when you win something, it doesn't just stop there. You're constantly growing and learning more about yourself. So when I got this pro, I just remember even shutting down even more and being like, oh my gosh, what now? Like, so I never want to arrive. It just feels too good. Yeah. I constantly want to be going out there. But going back to feeling these feelings like I'm built for this, every time I start a new project and I see it all the way through, I never give up on something because I need to make it sure I see it all the way through. I'm not half in, half out when I start projects. I'm now built to like, I don't look at who's looking at me, who's viewing me, or questioning me. I don't.
That's part of the thick skin.
It's part of the thick skin. Yeah. I'm built for this.
It's what we all need. Like, guys, this is a conditioning process. Like, the thick skin is good. Like, Now, the whole point of how to build it thicker and build that mental capacity is to understand the different phases of where your mind will take you. The different phases will create the physical matter of your life. Now, if you get stuck on phase 1 and 2, good luck to you. You're going to notice very little growth. You're going to notice constant chaos within your business, within your marriage, within your body, because it's there, especially when we start a new diet. Yes, and you face this obstacle and you find yourself off your diet. It's like negativity. I've always been big. I'll never get to where I want to be. Second phase is like the comparison. Look at her, look at him, look how great shape, it must be their genetics. And we stay, and people tend to stay there until one day they get the courage enough to try it again. But they fail to go to the third spot, the positivity, the things that you have overcome, the ability to tell yourself you can do it, to get back on track. And it's something that I was talking to my sister as well. She was there at the competition supporting Rio. I'm going to say Rio, not really me. She was supporting Rio. And one of the things that she mentioned was like, I was telling her, because I came in first, so we had an opportunity to talk. I came in first about 10 minutes, Brennan, like before the second place person came in?
According to Jesse, 7, but
it was 10 to 12 minutes. I can't remember. So I had plenty of time to wait for these guys to catch up to me. And I had an opportunity to talk to my sister, and I said, she started asking me some questions. I said, hey, it all comes down to like what we tell ourselves during the process. Like through the run, I was hurting. I was cramping up. Like I felt like I needed to stop and walk. And this is something that I faced before on my first triathlon that I did a couple years ago, where I did have to stop and walk. I was like, no, I'm just going to keep going. Eventually, it's going to fade away. So my walk was a little bit more like a limp run. My run was more like a limp run. But I ended up going through it. I was like, I'm built for this. I'm going. I'm going to finish this. And then she says to me, it's so important. I guess it is so important to talk positivity to ourselves. Because one of the things that she mentioned was like, I was on this challenge to go up this mountain. And all I was doing, and we talked about this earlier, Carla, all I was doing, she says, was telling myself, why am I even out here? I shouldn't keep going. Like, I want to stop, to a point where she did stop. And I said, Nitsa, you got to be able to determine when this comes in and go to phase number 3 of where you can go. And it's funny, right after we had that conversation, Brennan walks up to her and she says, hey, I want to interview you. And the first thing she says was, I'm not good at interviews. I hate doing these interviews. So I had to stop her right there. I said, you're doing it again. We have to recognize where we're doing it in our lives, because that is stopping you from growing your business. You got to recognize where you're doing it in your lives from getting to the body and the shape you want to be in, and in your marriage. And these are the things that we wanted to discuss, Carla, because it's just so important. It relates to every aspect of our lives, right?
Yep.
And this is what we have to do. So guys, like with today, I want you to just start thinking, what phases do you get stuck in? Is it phase 1, where it's just negativity all by yourself? Is it phase 2, where you're comparing yourself to others? Or do you actually go to the phase 3, and how long does it get you to get there? Which is, I can do this. I can move forward. I'm going. So that's it, Carla. What'd you think?
It was good.
Good stuff, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Let's see who's on our mindset. Let's go ahead and check in. We got Patrick Foster, Nick. Thank you for joining us. Gabriel. We got Cindy. Who cares who is doing better? What I am doing. Look in the mirror and compare to that reflection. Bruises and wounds heal. Words are completely absorbed. Good morning, AZ and Carla. From Jason, Patrick. I can relate to both sides. You can be physically be ready and talk yourself out of victory. The mind is far more powerful than your physical ability in a lot of cases, especially when you know you are physically ready.
It's funny, Patrick. I remember and just kind of going on stage, and I remember my coach giving me a little pep talk in the back, and both of them, they were like, you're physically ready. You've been physically ready for like the longest time. But if you don't believe in yourself and that you are good enough, you're going to constantly be placing 10th, 7th, 6th, 4th, 3rd. You have to, and I remember them saying, when you go on stage, you need to close your eyes and truly believe that everyone is here for you and everyone's cheering for you. And in your mind, you just have to hear these like, rah. And I'm like, that's hard because it's never been like that for my whole life. And so it's hard to like vision that because I've never had that type of vision. I've always had the vision of shutting my eyes and feeling the pain of someone going into negativity. So for someone to tell me easier said than done, to shut my eyes and just believe the whole audience is cheering for me and they came out to see me, only me. So I'm like, okay, but it's hard because I have a bunch of teammates in line as well. So how about them? Like, if I'm doing that for myself, wouldn't that be selfish? Like, do I leave them behind? So all these things were going in my mind. But I just remember all with them telling me like, physically you're ready, but we can't get you that first place because you don't really want it. That was repetitive. And just one day I remember just shutting my eyes in that show and I'm like, I'm just going to close my eyes and pretend everyone is here, regardless if I hear crickets, if I hear no noise, like everyone's screaming my name. It really worked. I went to the X and I remember just blowing kisses and waving.
The X on the floor.
The X on the floor when they called my name and I won. I took them all. I'm like, what? Like, does this really work? So moving forward, there's many times that I shut my eyes on all these projects that I start from my book, from my women events, from my speaking events, to my podcast, to all these things. I really shut my eyes and I'm like, I have billions of viewers looking at me and it feels great. Because I have one and I told this, a young lady who I did an interview with that was just like, you have to take every opportunity that comes your way, maybe small, big, take it like if it's your one and only opportunity because you'll never get it back. So now every time I start something new, it's like I shut my eyes and I pretend billions are watching me and I'm constantly delivering. And it just feels so great. It feels so great. But it didn't start there. I mean, it started by little reps that I had to do throughout every opportunity that's come my way. I just remember sitting one time before any show, and I remember I used to run the UPS store, and I used to sit at UPS store dreaming about being in magazines. And now I've been like in two. I'm like, wait, it doesn't just stop there. Now I'm comfortable because I'm in a magazine. Now people are asking me, yeah, sure, why not? Can you give this speech? Yeah, sure, why not? Can you do this podcast? Yeah, sure, why not? Now I'm just dominating in my world and what I see. I don't care if hundreds, thousands, I don't care. In my mind, I shut my eyes and I see billions watching me. And it just feels so great. And that's everything I do, from my business to personal goals to business goals. It's insane on where your mind can take you. And it's so true. You can be physical. And I see a lot of people out there walking around with this phenomenal physique, but there's always something going on. Well, there's always growth within us. Like, it's crazy what the mind can do to us.
It can build. It can make a break, and create the physical matter. I do remember when we met in our early 20s, you used to buy these magazines, and you're like, man, I want to compete one day. I want to be in this magazine. And, there was a memory that was brought to my attention on Facebook, and it has you in the magazine. And I was like, I remember, going back, rewind 10 years ago, you were there and you created it. And it happened when it was supposed to happen. So guys, keep that in mind this week as you start going on your week for your business or any challenges you've put on yourself, right? Whether it is getting in the best shape possible, whether it is reconnecting with your spouses, whatever it may be, or with your spouse, not spouses, but with your spouse, whatever it may be, just understand that what you think about and where your mind goes will be created in the physical life. So go at it, go through the different phases and end up on phase number 3. That's where we need to dominate and to remind yourself how great you truly are. Guys, that's all I got. Thank you, Carla, for coming on to this Mindset Mastery. And guys, we'll talk to you soon and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye now.